So as most of you, I think, know by now, this is the third of three speaker series that the City of Healdsburg is putting on. It's part of an overall outreach program as we work on the development of their strategic plan. My name is Kendall Flint, and I am the Director of Communications and Strategic Planning for Regional Government Services. And what we are here to do tonight is actually get a really good presentation from some of the leadership of the SDAT group, as well as individuals that participated actively in a number of their different focus area groups. And then they're going to walk through and tell you a little bit about what they came up with. Now, the original group, when they initially got together, they put together a plan that was really looking at an overarching vision for 2040. And that was about a year ago, but since then, they've been meeting together in smaller groups, exploring some various topic areas that they're going to share with you tonight. Once they've completed their presentation, we're going to open it up to the floor for questions and answers, and then we're going to have a quick little click poll thing. Now, some of you who just arrived, I think this is the sad news for my panelists, you're going to have to give up your clickers. Yes, sorry. Steve? Two, okay, so who in the audience right now does not have a clicker? If you could raise your hand for me. Okay, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, okay. I want you to know they're sacrificing their clickers for you. I hope everyone appreciates that. Okay, so as I mentioned, this effort is a long-term process by which what we're trying to do is get as much information from as many different groups as possible so that the City Council can have a really effective discussion about their strategic plan for 2020 to 2025. One of the reasons that we're here tonight with SDAT is because with so many people participating and so many really good ideas coming out of that process, we wanted to make sure that it was included so that when we're going through all of this, if there's great ideas, you know, we're not ashamed to use them. So the idea is to have both of these efforts kind of work in collaboration so that we're able to get those ideas, bring in other ideas, and then we'll bring that all back together. Now, August of next month, August, we're going to be having a series of staff workshops, and then we're also going to have a larger public workshop, and I hope all of you will come back for that. It'll actually be 2 on August 21st and 22nd at the Villa, and that will be an opportunity for us to share with you all the information that we found over this long 2 or 3 month process. By giving us your email address tonight, just so you know, everybody in this room, as well as it'll be on the website, will get a copy of that summary report prior to that workshop, so you can look and see what people said, what other people said, and kind of get an idea about what kind of topics we'll be focusing on. So with that, who am I going to toss this to, Richard? I'm going to toss it to Richard, and I'm going to give the second mic to this downstairs place for right now, so you'll have to share. This is the kids' table, just so everybody knows. Okay.
I need the clicker. Good evening. Nice to see so many familiar faces. Yes. So just briefly, what we've brought together are a team of people who've been working for months on how to take the SDAT recommendations and prioritize them for the city's strategic planning process. That's only part of what SDAT might lead us to. But let me introduce quickly the people who are here. Starting in the kids' table, Tim Unger on the right, Walter Niederberger, Stephen Kent, Cindy Curley, Charles Duffy. Up on top, Jim Winston, Mark McMullen, George Lawson, Deb Kravitz, and I'm here. So, and you can read that. This evening's presentation will be on the city's website with slides and video, so you'll be able to catch up and read all those educational places that we came from. On the right, you see the home page from the SDAT website, and on the left, the logo and name of Healdsburg 2040. We took that name because the suggestions were looking forward 25 years, 20 years. And SDAT was a process that ended with those meetings in August and the final report that was delivered in November of last year. Over this period, over 800 people participated in the SDAT process. Healdsburg 2040's goal was to prioritize those recommendations for integration with the city's strategic planning process. We broke Healdsburg 2040 into 4 work groups around the areas suggested by the SDAT final report. Arts and culture, is that for me? Housing, master plan and general plan, and parks and connectivity. But also, there were suggestions in the final report that turns out were actually underway by the city, and I'm going to talk about them in terms of near term. This evening, we're talking about the city's strategic plan. What will come after that is a general plan update, likely to begin in the next 12 months. And the SDAT pointed towards that for changes that they suggested also. So we came up with 5 broad strategic initiatives. But in the current activity, this is near term and underway. Just quickly, the city has a master plan on how to use the city's properties for affordable housing. There are 3 city properties that are being examined. One is the 14 acres at the Montage site. Another is the Cherry Building. And the third is the property behind Big John's, about 3 acres. The city also, if you've been paying attention, has purchased a couple of properties that already have low-income rents, and they've been able to partner with Burbank Housing and keep those properties with affordable rents and keep them from being sold, upgraded, and sold to the next comer. Arts and culture, the city's arts and culture master plan has been contracted for, and this is a project that will look at how to move arts and culture forward in the city. That has begun, and the Arts and Culture Group has been quite active, and there are opportunities for everyone in the city, including the Arts and Culture Group, to participate in a creative leadership team that will be formed to guide the arts and culture consultants as they look at the city and how to increase the community as an arts-aware and culturally aware community.
And as an example, we'd like to give the mic to George Lawson, who's been very active in arts and culture, and has got a couple words he'd like to share with us.
Thank you. Out of the SDAT report, what was interesting is the number of suggestions and actions that were being recommended by in that report based on community interaction and their study. And for example, develop a comprehensive list of arts and culture entities and experiences, and develop strategies for communicating those to our community. And so as a matter of fact, we've got our draft of that and kind of in final stages, and our group has worked on that. We've been meeting now for 6 months, every 2 weeks, and we've had 66 people involved in 1 or more meetings. So anyway, we're very happy with the kind of interaction that we're getting, and we're now in the process and have developed, and I think hopefully you have the handout, it was in color, but of our strategic initiatives that we came up with and goals that really came out of SDAT, and then our further thinking and discussing with these 66 different inputs.
And now I'd like to turn this over to Deb Kravitz, who will continue the slideshow. I have to change the slide, though.
So before we get into the nuts and bolts of the slide presentation, I wanted to take a moment to thank the city for giving us this platform and this opportunity tonight to address you. As Richard mentioned, we've been working on trying to filter through the SDAT recommendations from the report that came out in November. And we're really grateful that the city has given us this opportunity to try to integrate those recommendations into the strategic planning process. So what we're trying to do tonight, what the meat, sort of the substance of the presentation is our pitch. It's what we would like to see in the strategic planning process in terms of strategic initiatives and some goals, and we're even going to talk about some specific action items. As we were developing our strategic initiatives, we looked at the city's existing 5-year strategic plan, and there were 5 strategic initiatives in the current plan. So we thought that was a good place to start, but we wanted to update those initiatives to reflect things that were in the SDAT report from November, as well as our perception of where Healdsburg is today and where it needed to go. Livability is really the overarching goal that we're trying to meet. We're trying to balance all the competing needs in Healdsburg to improve livability for all of its residents. And as we were developing the strategic initiatives, there were really 3 main themes or operating principles that are the drivers for everything else you're going to hear about in our presentation today. And those are climate change, having a more diverse economy, and really improving citizen engagement. So everybody's voice, they have an opportunity to be heard, and an effective mechanism for the city to be able to take in what they hear from the citizens and be able to act on it. So with those 3 drivers, we came up with 5 strategic initiatives that we would like the city to consider in the new strategic plan going forward. They focus around sustainability, having a resilient economy, community vision, connectivity, and then adopting metrics in how the city governs itself. Next slide. So what we're going to do is, as the slideshow progresses, we're going to take a brief focus on each of the 5 strategic initiatives, and we're going to talk about 3 goals that we've developed, or proposed goals, I should say, for each strategic initiative. And then we'll zero in on one of those goals and talk about a potential example for an action item. Keep in mind as we work through these that this is still very much a work in progress. It's had our input, but we're throwing it out to the entire community for your input and others' input as the strategic planning process gets launched, so that this will be one input into the city's planning process.
So the first initiative, sustainability, which some of you may think is a pretty poorly defined word, but we'll get to define that as we agree that we need to think more focused ways about sustainability going forward. So the 3 goals: create standards to define sustainable development, to plan for a resilient, climate resilient future, and to broaden the community's understanding through education to support collective action. And you'll see that the red is carried forward to the next slide, and you'll see that on all the strategic initiatives. So to plan for a climate resilient future, an example of an action item might be to adopt a zero net energy ordinance for all construction and renovation in the city. That is a goal that the state may well mandate sometime in the future, and the metric for such a goal might be to adopt that ordinance by December of 2021. Deb? So one of the members of our group is Anne Arkwit, and she is currently in Dublin, Ireland at an international conference on global energy efficiency. She's speaking there. She's been working with us, and she sent us this.
Thanks for beaming me in from Dublin. I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about climate change. This is the one big topic that the SDAT report completely failed to address, but which needs to be a top priority for Healdsburg in the coming 5 years. I've been conducting climate research myself since the 1990s, and I can tell you that climate change is not only real, it's inevitable. We have to deal with it. We have to plan for it. Most of you probably experienced the wide-ranging indirect impacts of fires outside of Healdsburg in 2017 and 2018, which spewed thick cloud of toxic smoke over our town and hurt the tourism industry badly, not to mention endangering our own health and well-being. Just in the past few years, we've also experienced droughts, floods, mudslides, and an increasing number of 100+ degree days, all of which threaten our economy and our own health and quality of life. The Bay Area's average annual maximum temperature already increased 1.7 degrees Fahrenheit since 1950 up to 2005, and the increase will double to over 3.4 degrees by mid-century. Mid-century is not that far off. California's fourth climate change assessment found that nearly 70% of California's existing area of wine production will be vulnerable to extreme temperatures and temperature-related water scarcity by mid-century as well. So think about that, 70% of California's existing wine production vulnerable to climate change. You might not know that over 60% of Healdsburg's greenhouse gas emissions are caused by transportation. So shifting from cars to human-powered modes of transportation, getting local and regional pooled transit up and running, and electrifying the entire transportation system are three big approaches that we can take to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But most importantly, we have to plan for climate impacts in everything we do. Putting all of our eggs into the wine tourism basket is incredibly risky. So as I sign off here from Dublin, I look forward to working with our city officials and all of you to plan for a climate resilient future that will also improve livability and the quality of our life for decades to come. Thank you very much.
And was one of the participants in the very first IPCC report from the United Nations on climate change more than 20 years ago. Deb?
So moving on to our second proposed strategic initiative to plan for diverse, inclusive, and resilient economy, we had three proposed goals to achieve under that potential strategic initiative. One is to develop an arts and culture economy in Healdsburg, which I think would be a very exciting and enriching occurrence for all of our residents to enjoy. We also think we have to pay attention to preserving Healdsburg's identity and roots, while at the same time building on our assets to ensure a vibrant economy going forward. And we'd like to see the city implement an economic development plan that would diversify the economy and bring us jobs that have higher average wages. If we focus a little bit on that third goal, implementing an economic development plan that raises our average pay here in Healdsburg, one potential action item that we have as an example would be for the city to actively recruit a diversity of sustainable businesses that could offer higher paying jobs while protecting assets such as our limited industrial and commercial land. And a metric that we could propose to test that action item going forward would be for the city to adopt an annual report on business diversification. Some examples of areas that the city could focus on in terms of these higher paying jobs would be, for example, professional service jobs like in the medical field. Another one might be light manufacturing, and I think it'd be really exciting if that light manufacturing revolved around green products that could be developed and manufactured here in Healdsburg. Richard?
The third strategic initiative that we identified is to implement a clear, community-driven vision to guide the city's direction. The three potential goals that we identified under that initiative are to clarify and codify the type of development that Healdsburg wants, and needs, to expand the diversity of housing stock within the city, and to improve the inclusive participation of all groups. For an example, to improve inclusive participation for all groups, an action might be to implement strategies and programs to ensure that seniors have housing options. And a metric for that would be to provide a retrofit program for seniors to support aging in place by December of 2022. What that might mean is the city helps seniors who want to stay in their house, but help them by installing what are called universal design features, such as grab bars, ramps, and potential changes to other utilities in the house to make it possible, like a walk-in shower.
So moving on to the fourth strategic initiative that we're proposing, it's to improve connectivity. And the three goals we came up with to improve connectivity are to make Healdsburg a community oriented primarily towards people, emphasizing walkability and alternative forms of transportation. We want to better connect the city neighborhoods with the river, schools and parks, services, retail, and bike and pedestrian-friendly routes. And we also want to participate in a regional shift towards better regional transportation options that would be clean and efficient. And when we developed these goals, we intentionally included some that really look inward within Healdsburg city limits, but we also intended and are proposing a goal that is more outward looking, talking about the regional transportation, because we want to be able to connect Healdsburg more efficiently to our surrounding areas, not just for recreation, but also to ease the burdens of commuting and the impact on our environment. So if we zero in a little bit on the one example goal, making Healdsburg a community oriented more towards people, emphasizing walkability, one potential action item would be to move Healdsburg from a bronze level bicycle friendly community, the status we have today, to move us to the gold level, which is a much higher, more rigorous standard. And I'm going to toss the mic at this point to Walter to talk a little bit about cycling here.
Yes. Yes, hello, thank you. So actually, Anne and I, Anne is my wife, she talked before. We moved up here in 2015 from the city for one reason, not the only one, but one reason was bicycling. Healdsburg is one of the best bicycle spots in California. Actually, I looked it up. Bicycle Magazine already in 2011 named Healdsburg one of the 6 best places in the US for cycling vacation. That means in the last years we had hundreds of bicycle touring groups in this city, bringing a lot of additional income, hotels, restaurants, and so on. And these are all high-income people, most of them, because 1 week here vacation costs $4,000 to $5,000. So I mean that tells you this is a really interesting tourist destination, brings in income. Additionally, one issue we have, and I heard that from many people here, that it's not really safe to bicycle around, not only for people like me, but for older people and not least for school children. And that's one of the issues we want to take up, and that's why we followed actually the lead of the city. They applied for the bronze level. There's an award by the American League of Bicyclists, and they applied for that. Windsor, by the way, applied for that 2012 already and got it in 2012. Healdsburg also tried to do it in 2012, had to wait 5 years because they're not as far. We are not as far as Windsor regarding safe bicycling. So our goal is actually to move that bronze level, which is the minimum level, to the silver level and then to the gold level. Which means, for instance, just 2 or 3 examples what it means in reality. Healdsburg Avenue right now is the main corridor through the city, but it's absolutely not safe for bicyclists, especially north. It's very open, it's very fast. I bicycle there, I don't have a problem, I'm used to traffic, but I think it's, for instance, not safe for school children in Parkland Farms, which want to commute or should perhaps commute to the school. So we have to make sure that, for instance, that main artery is very bicycle friendly, and that's one of the major goals, to create a bicycle and by the same time a pedestrian friendly city, because that goes hand in hand. It's not like opposites, it's hand in hand. So it's also very safe, and by the way, it gels in with like the concept of an age-friendly city, which is very important too, you know. So it's a safe city for seniors, for school children, and for bicyclists like me who are a little bit more attuned to traffic. But even I think sometimes it's quite iffy, you know, especially when around the circle. So that's one of the major goals. And for that, one of the single biggest issues and most important urgent issues is to create a bicycle advisory committee. The city just dissolved the transport advisory committee, but with this clear understanding of us, and I think the city, that there will be a follow-up, a new beginning, and we count on the city to work with us, and we will be very willing to work with them to really create a bicycle-friendly city.
Thank you, Walter. Could you give the mic to Mark? Talking about regional transportation, Mark could tell us a little bit about one of the things we've talked about.
Hi, I'm Mark McMullen, and one of the things that we're very interested in is not just the bike lanes in Healdsburg, and of course, I'm not a bicyclist like Walter is. I am a bicyclist who's very occasional because I really think it's unsafe. And it's very difficult from where I live in Parkland Farms to get downtown without taking your life in your hands as you get on Healdsburg Avenue. And the thing about building transit lanes for bikes, a lot of people will say, why would we do that? You know, there's not enough bicyclists. We should not be doing that. It's like, well, you don't build a bridge by counting the number of people swimming across the river. We build the bicycle lanes, and I will use them. I don't use them now because I don't think it's safe, and I think there's a lot of people like me that will do that. One of the things that we can work on as far as connecting Healdsburg regionally is to work with SMART to try and connect the Healdsburg Depot to the Windsor Depot by 2022 when the SMART train arrives in Windsor. It's very important to look at that path, because if we can have a path that lets us get from the Healdsburg Depot to the Windsor Depot safely on a very safe bicycle path, then it's a 5 mile, it's a very quick ride down there. It would be very efficient for us to use, and also for the people that would be coming up from the Bay Area or elsewhere who want to come to Windsor and then take that bike path up to Healdsburg. It would help reduce the amount of cars and automobiles that are coming into town. So I think that's a very important thing that we can work on with the SMART, especially since they're looking at renewing their tax here in the next couple of years. So we can utilize that to leverage, to help get that path regionally to help connect. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark. So the fifth strategic initiative that we identified was to achieve metric-driven excellence in government. Goals. This is about SMART goals. To improve transparency, accountability, and performance. To explore alternative revenue sources beyond tax revenues to achieve our goals. And the third proposed goal is to significantly strengthen resident participation in the process of government. And by way of example, to significantly strengthen resident participation in government, we want to expand resident participation in the general plan. And that means involving community-based organizations to increase their participation. And that would include groups like Corazon, Kiwanis, the Rotaries, Healdsburg Shared Ministries. We often don't reach out to some of these groups that are fairly well organized with missions of their own. And another way to increase participation is to implement a digital engagement platform where you could put up a series of 3 or 4 questions. People could log on, They could answer those questions, and the city would have real-time, immediate response to things they're actually considering. The way in which you'd measure that is you'd report annually on numbers, outcomes, and the quality of action that resulted.
One thing I'd like to do is invite Mark Thiemig, who's sitting in the back, who runs Parks and Recreation, to talk about the two programs that he and Dave Jans and the rest of their department are pulling together with respect to arts and culture and also connectivity, parks and connectivity, how the community is being engaged, how the community is being brought in the formulation of specific advisory committees, the consultants that have been brought on board, and how that's expected to evolve. And in the same token, talk about how we might do something like that with the general plan, where we get that level of engagement working with the general plan as well. Here's a microphone, Mark.
Thank you. So we're launching two different planning processes through community services. One is the Arts and Culture Plan. The second is a Parks, River Access, and Connectivity Plan. And really the basis of the planning process will be a citizen-driven, citizen-led process with a citizen design team for each one of those, and there's flyers in the back of the room if you have an interest. For the parks planning process, it's a citizen design team. They're going to actually lead the design process with the consultants, represent the community. For the arts and culture planning process that Dave Jans is leading up, it's a creative leadership team. So really engaging the community right from the beginning to help steer that process and provide good feedback and insight into the process and the community goals for that process as well. Right. So we just launched the recruitment process on Saturday, actually. Plenty of time. The actual deadline is July 10th. There's forms available through the city's website to submit your name. It's really simple. So if you have an interest, Dave and I will be in the back of the room at the end. We also have flyers. You can also contact us through the city's website as well.
So if you're interested in following what Healdsburg 2040 is doing, you can sign up in the back. You can send us an email. You'll see our email address shortly. I did want to say, I said something about SMART goals. When we built these initiatives, we thought we have to set goals that have ways of measuring success. So those of you who've come from the business world might know what SMART goals are. I will share with you what that means. Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-oriented. And part of adding metrics to those sample action items was to say, if we want to do something, we have to measure our success at doing it. Whoops. Kendall.
Outstanding job. Can we just give them a round of applause for that? I mean, well done. We work in a lot of communities, and it's always really exciting when you see citizens that have stepped up and done this on their own time and really given some thought to these type of issues and really try to figure out ways that they can interact effectively with their local government. What I'd like to do right now is open this up for questions. Does anyone tonight have any questions for our panel? If you just raise your hand, I'll come over and bring you a mic. Questions, anybody? Okay. And if you wouldn't mind, just tell us your name so we know who you are.
Sure. Do I have to stand?
You can stand.
Hi, my name is Mike Welty. I've been here since 1973, was involved in the original RUDAT, bringing RUDAT to Healdsburg. One of my questions is that one of the things that's central to Healdsburg has been recreation. And in the year 2000, after failures of bond issues by the city and the school district, the community came together in an effort to pass bond issues to provide for parks and recreation for the city as a whole. The school district and the city came together with citizens, promising the citizens that whatever were parks, wherever they're located, are open to community use. Be it tennis courts, be it baseball fields. The track actually was constructed at that time. The fields for baseball and football and so forth were constructed, and there was to be a total redo of several other facilities in the school. This last year, arbitrarily, the school district and the city has closed those parks to the public. Rec Park is closed. You can't go there as a citizen unless you're involved in some specific use. The brand new track that we spent a lot of money on and the other facilities were closed and sort of gated in. So in a sense, what's happened is when you talk about transparency in this group and accountability, there's been no, have you had any discussion about the fact, not only the plan in the future, but the use of these facilities for all of us, and not limited just to like the school, which is diminished in size from 2,500 to down less than 600, or to the community as we get older. So for example, the fastest growing sport in the nation is pickleball. And I don't know how many pickleball players are here, but okay, that's right. But pickleball is mostly senior citizens. Del Webb is putting like 30 and 60 courts in their developments. We're talking about an older community here. We're talking about having activities that all of us, regardless of ethnic or any other, it's a diverse group that can play. Same with tennis, other things.
I'm going to nudge you for a question.
My question is, did you take any of that into account when you were looking into the future?
Our work was really focused on things mentioned in the SDAT final report, and that was not specifically called out. When they looked at connectivity and parks, their view of connectivity and parks was more macro, and in fact, I don't know that the city's strategic plan, which was what we've been focused on, could really address the school board's decision to close the fields at the school. But that certainly is something that could be discussed further.
I wanted to add on that. In one of our focus groups, one of the things came up was better collaboration between the school board and the council. And so that goes to regional collaboration, not only for transportation things, but also for use of facilities. That would be something that we would come back and bring to council for consideration moving forward. So point well taken for Parks and Recreation. That has come up in some of the other focus groups. Other questions? Yes, sir. And let's try to make them questions.
So my name is Peter Deutsch, and I've been living here in Healdsburg for 7 years. There are a tremendous number of elephants in the room, and I'm not going to try to cover more than one of them in my question, but I have many other questions. The specific question that I'm going to ask right now has to do with sustainable development and sustainability in the community. And it seemed to me from the presentation that what that seemed to mean to people was primarily energy. And the particular elephant in the room that I'm seeing here is water. Something that I saw actually in a good deal of this presentation is that fairly strenuous efforts have been made consciously or not to avoid stepping on people's toes. And water use is a toe stepper in Healdsburg because of the very large amount of water used by wineries. And secondarily, the large amount of water used by hotels. So the question that I have is, where does water figure into sustainability planning going forward?
Good question. Who wants to take that besides the woman in Holland? I can phone her, but you want to phone a friend? Yeah, yes. Oh, well, here. You can use mine.
Okay. Well, I'm not a water expert, but my wife, she's a climate expert, and you're totally right about sustainability. It's not only about energy, it's also about all kinds of resources. And water is one of the major topics we talked about in our groups. Because, as you said, you know, our whole industry, I mean, the whole economy is very much wine and high tourism based. In other words, totally dependent on water, right? So that's why we put climate change so high on our priority list, because we think that the city didn't think enough about these issues yet. You know, I looked it up. There was a climate report the city created in 2002. That was the first report. No follow-up, nothing. So when we read the SDAT report, we found that SDAT didn't really mention climate issues and therefore resource issues, and that's why we hope that the city council adopts a real and urgent climate plan, because we have to be prepared. What happens when there's not enough water? What happens if the temperatures increase? Are we Australia and can't grow wine anymore all of a sudden? What happens to tourism then? So we have that whole chain reaction, and water is one of those ones. So I know I don't directly answer your question, but it's for us a very, very high priority, and really we want to follow up and hope the City Council will take it into account in their strategic planning process.
I think water is not the only issue. I think we have economic sustainability to worry about as well. I mean, we're very dependent on tourism and the wine business. And if you look at the effect of the forest fires and so forth on the industry of tourism, I think we all know people that would have come here but maybe didn't in the last year or two because of either fear of the smoke or being in a fire or whatever. So one of the reasons we need to pay attention to economic diversity and having other industries is if there's some kind of a slowdown in the wine business or the tourism business, there's still work being done here. So I think that's a second piece of that. And I'm sure you could look at all the energy things that we would talk about and we should do just as good citizens, but they're not as focused on Healdsburg specifically. But I think we need to pay attention to the economy related to sustainability. So one thing we can all do is work on doing things to prevent forest fires from affecting us. And one thing the city could do is add an ordinance or some rules about when you build a new construction that you have to use cement board siding or things that are less more fire resistant. So I see new houses going up in the woods on Fitch Mountain that are all wood exterior, and that's ridiculous.
Jim, you want to add something to that?
Jim Winston. One of my concerns that I've been struggling with that sometimes keeps me up at night is water. It's a finite resource, and we keep using more and more of it, and in an irresponsible way. I think it's something that it's a resource that needs to be managed, properly. So we don't have to consider turning on the tap and nothing comes out. But what we're looking at primarily with water use is now you've got hundreds and hundreds of hotels that are slated to be developed, a total of about 850 in the next couple of years, and then a lot of low-income, affordable type housing, which I'm very supportive of, but that takes demands too. And then, the tourists they're spending $600-700 for a room. They're not going to take a 5-minute shower, and so we're giving up a lot of our resources and not getting much back in return. I think that we're missing a balance, and there's a balance between the tourism and how we survive as a city.
I think it's important also to know when we talk about sustainability, as folks have mentioned, it's not just environmental, it's also economic. It also has to do with sustainability of the community in order to have appropriate housing and amenities and services. I saw a hand come up over here someplace. Here we go.
Hi, I'm Chris Berardo. I've lived here for about 7 years now. And my question is a fairly basic one, and that is there any coordination now going on between the SDAT planning and the City Planning Commission and the City Council? Because I've gone to several meetings recently where these hotels are being approved and everything, and it seems like they're not really paying attention to what we were all saying last year when we turned out at our meeting and what we want. I don't remember there being a lot of requests for more hotel rooms, but we're getting them. And one of the meetings I went to recently about the Northern Development Plan, they said that, yeah, there are some traffic problems that are inevitable and unfortunate, but they're going to go ahead anyway. At the Planning Commission, the vote was 5-0 in favor. Same with environmental impact of tourism, that they have environmental impact studies, but it doesn't seem to be registering with the Planning Commission and the City Council what we all came out last year to talk about. So my question is there coordination going on now? And if not, how soon will it filter down to them or filter up to them?
Go for it, Tim.
Okay. So SDAT has been working closely with the city and building a relationship where we've made vast strides, and frankly, many of us are encouraged about the relationship that we're building with City Manager David McCallion, the Assistant City Manager Joe Irvin, who's here. There he is. The various department heads. And what's important is that clearly it's easier to gain advantage when you're collaborative and working with people. It's easy to get up and rant and rave, but typically it's more difficult to get the end result that you desire. Having a voice and being a participant in doing some work and making your opinion known, like the point that Mr. Welty made, that was a very well taken point. There are a number of people up here and 60 to 70 active people in SDAT. 60 or 70 people aren't going to get everything done that the city wants to do. When I talk about the city, I'm talking about the electorate and the citizens within town. So it's very important to engage and to participate and make your thoughts and your feelings known, and to get involved and back things up with data-driven recommendations and decisions. We've taken a very logical, lucid, calm approach about how we're pursuing what the SDAT had to offer in terms of its report. We've also supplemented that with different ideas based on what we didn't think the SDAT offered in terms of what Healdsburg might need to embrace, such as a climate change initiative. So this is really a plea to you and to your friends and to your neighbors to get active and get involved. Some of these groups only meet once a week for an hour. We keep a very strict schedule, and we hold to that. It's not a lot of work if you coordinate and you team together. So the answer to that question is we're working on it. And having an engaged citizenry is the difference between success and not. Thanks, Kendall.
No problem. Other questions?
Can I add to that?
Absolutely.
So I participated in a focus group a few months ago that was part of this process with about 8 of the major business leaders in town. And one of the things that when Kendall asked what's really important to you, what should we be doing differently, they all wanted to have more predictability in the planning and development process. So if you look at the North Entry plan that Chris was mentioning, I went to a few of those meetings, and it seemed like it was a very long, drawn-out process where what we're sort of recommending now is that the city tell the developer up front what their goals and needs and expectations are for a given project, rather than sort of play cat and mouse for a year or two while a developer is spending $50,000 a month to just carry the cost of the project. So part of that is getting involved and getting the city and all of us to agree that maybe more hotels isn't the thing we need, especially expensive hotels. And so the goal under, I can't read it, implement a clear community-driven vision to the growth to guide the city's direction, to clarify and codify the type of development Healdsburg wants and needs. So that's part of our recommendation for the strategic plan to actually do that.
Okay, I'm walking back this way. Hold on here.
My name is Ted Crowell. I've been here, my wife and I have been 1899. My question has to do with the goal for community well-being. I don't see much mention here about how the role of the hospital and the Alianza has figured into this, and particularly their vulnerable status economically, and how that might figure into what we need to do to ensure a better community health.
Who's hoarding the mic up there? You guys have got to share.
So we've got an informed audience here. We've got Joe Harrington in the audience. I think I saw, is Joe here? Joe? Joe runs the hospital. And I know there's some conversation that's happening between the city and the hospital about those very things. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot, Joe, but you are a resident here with your lovely wife. And you came specifically to Healdsburg to run the hospital. I think this might be a great opportunity for you to chime in, if you would, please.
Thanks, Tim. I also play pickleball, and but not quite as much as my wife. All right. So I've been here about a year and a half. Spent 25 years in Lodi, running the hospital down there. Came up here, and you're right. Every small rural hospital, probably in the country, is vulnerable. All right. And in order to maintain any type of healthcare services here, particularly in an inpatient hospital setting, it's going to take a lot of energy. All right. So we're looking at kind of parallel paths. One of which is building a new hospital. And I've been engaged with the city about talking about where would we be able to find some land to build a new hospital that is not too far away from our current location, hopefully still within the city of Healdsburg. And then we also have this issue with this, the state of California. Come 2030, we have a huge seismic problem. We have to meet seismic standards that were passed in 1996 with the Harris Seismic Safety Act. It'll probably cost us somewhere around $20 million to retrofit the existing facility. So one of our decisions that we have to face, and our board's decision is, do we really want to spend $20 million into a 50-year-old facility? And the answer is probably not. We'd rather put that into a new hospital. So, but we're still going down those parallel paths, all right? Trying to maintain, some financial viability along the way with growing some of the services, looking for other partners in the healthcare system in order to be able to, again, remain here, provide the services, to everyone around, and actually grow some of those services. One of the things they brought up was there's a lot of services we don't do, all right, simply because we don't have the resources to do them. One I'll bring up just is I almost had an opportunity to start a medical oncology program, all right. Not huge, but you need to have a physician who is a medical oncologist, and attracting physicians to the area is difficult, and not just with specialist physicians, but with primary physicians also. So I can tell you, as long as I'm here, going to be engaged in trying to make sure that we have those services here. We clearly need to technological upgrade the hospital. I've been dealing last with, as kind of a building that hasn't been, had a lot of tender loving care. I'm worried when I go to work that the HVAC units are going to break down, all right? And so from my perspective, all right, it takes such a long time, however, to develop and build a new hospital, probably 5 to 8 years, all right? But the time to start is now, because that's a resource I think that the community needs, wants. It'll bring a lot of jobs, all right, if we are able to grow those services. The other thing that kind of ties in is that I got to have affordable housing for the people who work for me. We got 350 employees, and we got a $40 million payroll. A lot of that gets spent here in the community. We don't want to lose that, all right? We want to grow it, maintain it, and actually have it support whatever else the community wants to do. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, one of the things I look at every day is that census and that how many people come through the emergency room. And along with that information is not just the numbers, okay, but you also can see insurances, if they have insurance. And there are a lot that do not, okay. So from that standpoint, we're servicing them. It's just that it taxes you financially, all right. California is a pretty good state, however, to be in. It covers a lot more than if we were in Idaho or Iowa, all right. But it continues to be a challenge, and I think that's one thing in our mission that our board's committed to doing also. Okay. Yeah, walk before we run. It is very, very expensive. So, let me just give you one aspect of it. So I was in Lodi for 25 years. Every year we were there, all right, we talked about two things. About, do we continue to do OB services? OB always loses money for the hospital, okay? And we were doing 140 to 150 births a month, so it wasn't a small program, all right? We kept that program because it's the first connection usually young people have with the hospital. all right? And you want to have that community aspect, all right? The other was a heart surgery program, all right? And so we were in Lodi, and 30 miles up the road, they got some of the finest heart facilities in the nation. And so when we looked at what it was going to cost to start a program, all right, whether it was, kind of trauma care or open heart surgery program, et cetera, the numbers just didn't match. And you have to look at it as saying is that, do you really want to offer a service to the community that you don't do well? Because you got to get, good quality physicians to move to the area. And they're all right now in San Francisco, and probably, I can't pay them enough to come up here. We did put it on the list to look at, however, all right? How do we upgrade, for instance, the emergency services to the next level, all right? That's probably something that's in there, but trying to be a trauma center is probably not something we're going to be able to do, right?
Kendall, one quick point here, talking about coordination between the city and SDAT, and the question that Chris Barato brought up earlier. A number of us involved with SDAT know that there's an issue for the hospital and it needs to be remedied, and understand how important it is for the community. We actually spoke with, I personally spoke with E.J. Neal, who's on the board. I've gotten to know Joe Harrington. A number of people spoke with David McCallion. We talked about this. David is running hell-bent on election to try to figure out how to work in parallel with Joe Harrington to find a new location and get something done. And that was because a number of people in the community talked about this, and David was already working on this in parallel, and that level of support makes a difference.
Okay, we've got time for a few more questions. I'm going to pop over there. Okay.
While we're waiting for the question, my name is Charlie Duffy. Joe alluded to something that's very important in the SDAT report, and I urge everyone to take a look at it, download the PDF, look through it. It's a really, really exciting document, and it's not a lot of technical verbiage. It's really a well-written report. But it points out the fact that so many of the things are very interconnected. Okay, we talk about, one of the things they talk about in the SDAT report is that Healdsburg is facing a demographic bomb. Okay, look around, folks. Okay. Now, what that means is that if not now, in the near future, we're going to be needing some of those services that Joe talked about. We're going to need respiratory therapists. We're going to need more physical therapists. We're going to need all kinds of different things. Now, those people need places to live. Okay, so we need to think about our housing mix here in Healdsburg. It's not just the doctors, it's all the therapists, it's the registered nurses, licensed professional nurses. There's plenty of those jobs. Those jobs also are great potential jobs for the sons and daughters of people who live in Healdsburg right now, okay? The people who want to have upward mobility but want to stay in Healdsburg. So all of these things are connected, and all of these things deal with our economy. Living in place, having seniors aging in place is a wonderful idea. But you're going to have very specific building skills to help those people get that. Where do they get the building skills? Through education. So it's very important for us to look at having Santa Rosa Junior College having some sort of branch up this direction. Okay, say in the south end of Healdsburg, or even here, as it was proposed at one time. They could then provide the skills that businesses want to have to bring when they come in. So they're not bringing people in from outside and parking downtown, if you know who I'm talking about, but instead, they're going to find a ready-made workforce right here of people who live in Healdsburg. And those people then helps us reach another challenge that SDAT talks about, is increasing the number of people who actually live and work in Healdsburg and who are invested so much in the town. Right now we have a fairly small percentage. By 2040, the goal is to have, SDAT recommends that we have 40% of our population living and working in Healdsburg. So that means we're going to have a lot of really good jobs. We can't do it on tourism. We can't do it on retail. We can't do it all on restaurants. We need medical technicians. We need skilled builders. we need metal fabricators, and they're going to need CPAs and lawyers, and so on and so on. And once the ball rolls, then we're talking about having a sustainable economy, a sustainable community, and a sustainable lifestyle for everybody here.
Hi, I'm Pat Karuba, and I've lived in Healdsburg for, I guess, 21 years now. I know originally when the AIA came, the SDAT had included schools and education in one of the initiatives that were going to be directed towards them. Did they come back with anything around that? I haven't read anything about that, but I do feel, just as this gentleman here was talking about, if we're going to be able to have a vitality in our community, we have to have it with young families here. And young families, one of the first things they look at is the schools. Not everyone who moves to Healdsburg can afford to send their child to a private school, so we need to make our own schools as vital and as exciting to attract these young people who perhaps would be even young entrepreneurs. They put all their money into the new thought, the new technology, and not really thinking in terms of having their kids get a second-class education. So we need to have the best of the best public schools here to attract these young people who will also bring jobs for the community here. So is any part of this, of the strategic plan, the sustainability of Healdsburg happening?
Pass the mic back there.
Well,
behind you. To Richard, thank you.
One of the problems, I think, that we experienced as we started with the SDAT final report and had conversations that moved directly to the point that Charlie made, that these things are all interconnected. But the truth is, just as that the SDAT report has elements that the school district should take up. We should be doing this with an audience of the Unified School District. We haven't planned that. We didn't talk much about schools, but the fact is, when you look at the community as an integrated system, there really is no segment that couldn't pay attention to what SDAT suggested and make changes in the way they move forward. But I don't think we can expect, nor should we want, our city council to start talking about what the schools should be doing. So I think you have to recognize that there are lots of opportunities for action and engagement, but that our focus here has been on the city's 5-year strategic plan.
So this is my third chance to bring somebody in from the audience to this conversation. We've got one of our Board of Education trustees here. We have two. We have Donna and we have Mike. So we could flip a coin.
I saw Donna raise her hand. It's like, yeah. Okay.
Hi, everybody. I'm Donna Del Rey. I'm a trustee on the Healdsburg Unified School District School Board. I've been an active participant in the SDAT process, wearing two hats. One is as a trustee, and the other is as a small business owner here in town. And of course, I live here also, obviously. So there's many, many opportunities to work together. I would also encourage you to come and visit the schools and talk to us about all the amazing things that are happening in the school district. I would completely disagree with the fact that, or with the idea or the concept that it's a second-class school district. We're doing amazing things in the district right now and have a lot of plans for improvement moving forward. It's never done. The work is never done, as it is with the City Council. And this is a web, for sure, of things that are all interconnected with, can young families afford to move here? Even if the school districts were the best in the state, can they afford to move here? And this is part of why we're seeing a decrease in enrollment, although not as dramatic as some of the numbers you heard earlier. So yeah, this is a really important thing to be a part of, and to be sure that we're all communicating and talking and making sure we're creating a community that meets the needs of everyone, including all the children and the students.
I'll come around. Excuse me.
I just really want to second what Donna said, but also to encourage you, just as this panel is encouraging you to get involved in SDAT, is to get involved in the schools, and many people that I see are. So feel free to knock on the door. You know, we have a website. You can get a hold of any board member, send us an email. I also agree with Donna, come and take a tour of the schools. There's a lot of great things going on. And I say this truly, you would be surprised. And I think people are when they go out and they take a look at the high school or the middle school and the elementary school. So I think we've got a lot of things going. Can we be better? Yes. Will we be? Absolutely. But it is going to be with your help and your involvement. So I encourage you, as Donna said, it is a web. So we're all together, and I know our superintendent has reached out many times to the city council as far as getting involved in working together, and we'll continue to do that, and we'll continue to emphasize that.
I also wanted to point out, as part of this process for the strategic plan, we actually went to the high school and had one of our focus groups with a bunch of the kids there, and it was an eye-opener, to say the least. But they were very excited. Any other questions? Yes, popping over there.
Hi, my name is Ariel Kelly. I have a question about the clear community-driven vision to guiding development, and the statement that Steve made earlier about how do we clarify and codify what we want for developers to build in Healdsburg. So I think from what I understand, so this is a clarifying question, from what I understand, the general plan update, which is a more longer-term endeavor that we're hoping the city starts in the near term, that would be kind of a long-term idea, but is the hope that we're looking at the land use code citywide? I'm curious if geographically speaking, if we're just looking at the downtown, or if this truly is geographically speaking kind of a broader look at what are we doing to update our land use code in the next 5 years, so that, for example, we aren't just telling developers we want them to build more hotels because that's what our land use code is telling them to do, or telling developers you can't build a preschool but you can build a gun shop here, and then being really reactive when we realize that our code is out of date. So I'm hoping that that is what you guys are talking about, and then just trying to get a better understanding of the timeline of that, and how do we as community members push to get that going, because I see, in general, I feel like a lot of what we see the council and planning department do are reactive, and so I feel like if we can get out in front of some of these decisions around hotels or around gun shops, you know, as an example, then we can actually plan for the future in a way that is more long-term and kind of strategic, as opposed to just continuing to chase our tail. Is that accurate in terms of the timeline, and how do we get that to happen?
One of the things that has emerged in our conversations about longer-term planning is the city has talked about the general plan update as a massive, large, expensive, long-term process. And it seems quite clear, looking at it more closely, that it actually can be broken up into much more manageable pieces, and the council and planning department could make a decision to do some of the elements of a general plan that are more pressing, exactly to what Ariel said, the land use code. If we need to build more housing, we need to change some of the land use so that there are places to build housing. It might be accomplished with neighborhood master plans, but underneath that, you need to change the land use code first. So there's no question that that suggestion is one of our goals, is to move things forward and not wait 5 years because it's part of a 5-year strategic plan, but actually begin sooner to resolve some of these problems that would allow different kinds of construction in different neighborhoods than we currently allow.
I want to add to that too. When we come back on our workshops in August, I can guarantee you that one of the subjects we're going to be talking about is the general plan and planning in general, and what options are on the table for consideration. And so the the time you can spend at that workshop weighing in with your ideas. And if you can't make the workshop, believe me, we're going to have it available online as well, because we want to get the most widest participation as possible. But that goes to housing, it goes to economic diversity, it goes to circulation, it goes to a number of the things that were brought up today. I've got time for one more question before we close up here. Yes, coming back there.
Is that specific to the city limits, or is that Healdsburg area?
The general plan is specific to the city limits, but if it's in the sphere of influence, it can still be considered in the general plan for policies when they would annex, let's say, if they were going to annex at another time. I can tell you that in the context of the focus groups that we've had, a number of folks have expressed concern about future annexations. They kind of like the compact nature of the city, but it's certainly something that could come up later. Did you want to add something on that?
Hi, I'm Cindy Curley, and I just want to echo what others have said tonight about community involvement. It is critical. We all live here. We all love this town. It's important to us. And if we don't get together and work together and let city officials know unequivocally what we want this town to have in it going forward, decisions are going to be made that we may not like the outcomes of. So I really encourage you all to get involved on whatever level you can, and I realize everybody's busy. I work full-time, I have a disabled spouse, grandchildren, family, things like that, but I felt it was important enough to get involved with this, and I'm really glad I did. And if, you know, the extent of your involvement can be reading the paper or sending an email or maybe going to a city council meeting, that's fine. But get involved on the level you feel comfortable with and be a part of it. And let's make this town what we want it to be. When you think about it, there's maybe 12,000 people in Healdsburg. There are universities that have bigger populations than this. So if we can't do it here and take control of this town and make it a place that we want to live in instead of a place we want to leave, then it can't be done anywhere. We can do this. So I encourage you all to get involved on the level that you can. And thank you for coming.
Well done on that, right? So speaking of engagement, everybody has their clickers. We're going to run you through just a very quick couple of little questions here. Don't touch the button yet. Okay, when I tell you to, you see how you have numbers on there? So in this case, the first question is, how did you hear about tonight's meeting? Number 1, the city's website. 2, Healdsburg 2040 email announcement. And that would also count for Slack, for those of you that are on that. 3, the city's Facebook page. 4, Nextdoor. 5, a newspaper. Or 6, the Healdsburg 2040 Facebook page. Click whichever one best represents, and you might have heard it from multiple sources, but whatever was top of mind that got you here tonight, click on that one, and then we have what we call instant gratification. Okay, clicking away, clicking away, clicking away. Has everybody clicked that wants to click? Okay, let's see what we got here. Okay, so Healdsburg 2040 email announcement, by far the biggest one out there, which is not surprising since so many of you participated, so that's great. Let's look at this next question. This kind of relates to one of the things that we brought up earlier. How concerned about climate change? How concerned are you about climate change affecting Healdsburg? Number 1, not at all. 2, yes, but really what can we do? 3, the city should manage minor impacts. 4, we must make changes in the way we live. Or 5, hey, this is a serious threat to our well-being. Which of these 5 best captures your feeling about climate change? 1, not at all. Yes. 3, manage minor impacts. 4, we must change the way we live. 5, a serious threat. Let's see what we have here. Okay, we must make changes and a serious threat. Really interesting thing on this, because not saying it's going to happen, but one of the things that we're going to be looking at, when you do a general plan update, possibly some communities put into that a climate action plan, into their general plan, so that these types of policies go back to the zoning, they go back to building, they go back to all these other things. So clearly this is something that the community, at least in this room tonight, has some concerns about. Okay, here's one for you. This is basically the recruitment pitch from Healdsburg 2040. Which of these interests you most? 1, arts and culture. 2, housing. 3, getting involved with the master plan or general plan. Or 4, parks and connectivity. Please click the one that you are most interested in. You may be interested in more than one, but pick the one is most. Got a few more clicks going. All right, survey says, what do we think? Ooh. Okay, and that's why there's 4 study groups. Steve, can you wave your hand in the back there? Okay, now I know all of you signed in with us, and many of you are also already on the SDAT list, but there is a sheet back there specifically for SDAT, and if you would like to get involved in some of these other areas, he's holding it up right there. If you haven't done so already, please make sure you sign on the way out and share that information so they can adopt you into the process and take over all your evenings. Kidding. Okay, how long have you lived in Healdsburg? 1, less than a year. 2, 1 to 5 years. 3, 6 to 10. 4, 10 to 20 years. 5, 20 plus years. How long have you lived in Healdsburg? How long? Okay, survey says. Okay, so that's really interesting because it shows that some of you folks who have maybe not been here as long are already getting really engaged. We found this to be true also in the focus groups as well as the other speaker series events, so it's kind of neat. Just a quick show of hands, how many of you are the 20 plus years people? Wow, okay, impressive. Okay, we changed this question on a request from our panel. Are you male, female, or we went with non-binary? I don't know. I'm trying to accommodate. So, male, female, or non-binary? No judging? Here we go. Okay, see? You never know. All right, here we go. What is your age? Please do not lie. And Maya, don't let your son click because that's unfair. That would skew our data. Are you under 18? Right. Are you 18 to 25? 2. Number 3, 26 to 35. 4, 36 to 45. 5, 46 to 55. You're starting to look at pickleball. 6, 56 to 65. Or 7, over 65. Everybody's in. I think we're going to see a trend. Yes, we are. Now, this is one of the reasons why you're likely going to be seeing us in the downtown area, at farmers markets, at the concerts, at other things. We're also going out to Corazon and these other areas because, believe it or not, sometimes people in their 20s with kids don't want to come to a workshop. How can that be? They're so fun. Okay, last question. Be honest, we can take it. How'd you like the meeting? 1, you loved it. 2, you liked it. 3, it was just okay. 4, you didn't like it. Or 5, you hated it. Honesty counts. Survey says no hate-its tonight. That's so awesome. Okay, good. So there was one on the last meeting. There was one hate-it. Oh, there is one, sorry. I'm convinced it's because of the cookies because they're too darn sweet. And you're going to fix that next time, right? Okay. So let me tell you what's going on here. First of all, again, thank you all for coming tonight. This is the beginning of a process. We're in the middle of it. There's some information up here about Healdsburg 2040. This will also be on the city's website. And also, you may have noticed my good friend Joe over here taping this for Facebook Live, which means if you want to watch it again later, knock yourselves out. Also want to let you know what's coming up next. Remember, public workshop at the Villa. This is going to be the Villa Annex on Wednesday, August 21st at 6:30. There will be a second duplicate workshop. We're doing 2 just to make sure that if you can't make one, maybe you can make the other. Again, it will be available online. And then finally, there'll be a City Council study session on Thursday, September 5th. And that's the point where we're going to present to Council all the things that we heard in all the different places that we were out chatting with people. And one thing that I found really, really heartening is a lot of the things that came out of the SDAT process were echoed in the focus groups, were also echoed in emails and other things that we received from the community. So there's a lot of commonality. There may be some disagreements about the way you get to fix some of these problems, but it's definitely the same issues we hear over and over: economy, housing, sustainability, diversity. So I want to thank you all again for being here with us tonight. Please make sure to leave the clickers with Steve. Don't make him chase you in the parking lot. And you guys all have a great night. And one more round for our panel.